Right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Textbook. Today I have the wonderful Winston with us, all the way from Canada, but he's also a resident teacher here at Elite. Welcome, Winston.
Hi, Aisha. Hi, everyone.
Hi. And so today we're going to talk about the question, should everyone be bilingual? So perhaps before we start, we will talk about a little bit about the parameters of our discussion today. So we're going to talk about the pros and cons of a non-native English speaker learning two languages or knowing two languages, and then we're going to talk about the pros and cons of a native English language person knowing two languages.
Sure.
So let's start off with Winston, if you could tell me an idea you have, some ideas you have about some of the pros, positive sides of non-native English speakers learning more than one language.
Well, for all of our listeners there, they're probably already studying English, so they're probably already bilingual, or at least a little bit. I can't see any downside to learning another language, learning anything, another skill or another language or anything else would be pure benefit. So for a non-native speaker to learn a language like English, obviously it would broaden their career opportunities. It would widen their travel opportunities. Being able to communicate with a larger number of people out there.
And I think that that's actually also true. We always automatically assume that the second language is going to be English, but what about like Korean and Russian?
Sure.
Yeah.
Today, like especially in the business world today, Mandarin Chinese is a huge and important language. Arabic is a language that is becoming more and more important these days, not just in one part of the world, but across the whole world. Spanish is so widely spoken around the world too. So there's lots of languages that are becoming or are just as important as English. So learning a third or fourth language is probably more realistic, especially for a lot of our listeners now.
Yeah. And one thing, as you said, having at least another language is actually positive, just like for your mind. I mean, you're expanding your mind more because when you take on another language, it's not just about being able to communicate. You're taking all the cultural things that are involved in that language as well.
Sure.
And you're really broadening your perspective on the world and people and us as a global community.
Yeah. And you're probably learning to use your brain in different ways that you're not using it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So.
And pronunciation. I know, for example, with Arabic, there's some sounds I can't make, and I try, and the Arab students try to help me to do it, and it's just quite good to understand that we don't all just speak. It's not just the words in the language. It's actually the formation of the sounds is different, and so many things that just expand our skills, and yeah. So okay, so that's a couple of pros. Again, for non-native English speakers, this time let's look at some of the negatives. What would some non-native English students say, do you think?
I think for some languages and nationalities, I guess there'd be a concern that making that language obsolete. So if I don't know, if I'm from some country that's a smaller country and and that language is only spoken in that country of, let's say, 5 million people. If the people of that country learn English as a second language and become more proficient, does their native language become obsolete or risk becoming obsolete?
That's true, because people can end up thinking that English is the only language to know and what's the point, but we forget, like you say, how much culture and tradition is held inside the language, the person's own native language.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about non-native English speakers. What about native English? This is the tough one. Trying to convince an American or an Australian, you got to know two languages.
Well, yeah, I mean, being Canadian, not being able to speak French well, actually not even being able to speak it at all, I do feel as a little bit limited. Have Had I known how important learning a second language is, I probably would have kept my French and my mother tongue. But it's a little bit late now. But I think, like I said before, native or non-native speaker, learning anything new would be a benefit. And even if you are a native English speaker, learning a second language would also help you from a career standpoint, from a travel standpoint, from a personal relationship standpoint. If as a native speaker, and if I were to learn Arabic or if I were to learn Chinese, I'd be able to communicate with that many more people. Right?
That's right, and I think it's very. It goes the same way, like you were saying about non-native English speakers learning another language, for example, English, helps them broaden their opportunities. Same thing for native.
Sure.
Because they might, let's say they want to do business in China, knowing Mandarin, I'm sure would be incredibly useful for them.
And actually, having done business in China and looking like a local, anytime the factories and the management of the companies, when they see, let's say, white people or native Canadians or Americans who can actually speak Mandarin, they're so impressed, and it actually facilitates business differently. Like they treat them differently. They have a different kind of respect and a different I guess admiration for somebody who's learned their own language, and business usually works out a little bit better.
So you also speak Mandarin as well?
I don't. Okay. I look like I should, but I don't. So when they hear me speak, they can tell I grew up in Canada, and they're shocked that I can't speak Chinese or any other Asian language. But
yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm a little bit lazy that way. So yeah.
Okay, so what do you see as some of the reasons why native English speakers may not want to learn a second language?
Well, currently in today's environment, I would say that English is the I guess dominant international language that for business, for travel, for personal. So I can see a native English speaker saying, well, if Chinese becomes more important or if Arabic becomes more important, then that lessens the importance of English. So the dominance or the importance of English kind of decreases if other languages become more popular or more widely spoken. So I can see that as an argument not to learn another language, but to me it's like, why limit yourself, right?
Yeah. And I guess another thing is a lot of native English speakers are living and working in a world that's kind of very high powered, in a lot of stress, a lot of tension, to keep up with everything. The thought of taking an extra few hours a day to go off and learn a second language is just like the lowest priority they would consider.
The time and the money and the effort and the energy to learn a lot of the language would be a nuisance for some people, sure.
And I guess they have to have a reason. I mean, I think a native, like if they get a job and in their job they do a lot of business with China, a lot of business with South America or whatever, sure. they think, okay, I better learn Spanish or Mandarin or Cantonese or something. And then when the pressure comes probably from their company, then they will embrace it obviously a lot more.
But I mean, I guess with anything in life, if the motivation comes from within, if it's a personal motivation, you're probably more successful at it and probably more passionate and more willing to learn. Whereas if your company's forcing you to learn Arabic because you're doing business with a Middle Eastern company, then probably a lot of reluctance and a lot of pushback on why do I have to do this? So I guess it's just, to me, it's just about being open-minded and about just the willingness to learn. Like, why not?
So I want to ask you a little bit about Canada. I've also been
Sure.
to Canada. One thing that really struck me when I went to Canada in Toronto was how everything was bilingual. On the road, on the signs, in terms of in the trains, in the buses, so on. Everything was English and French, and yet I never met anyone who spoke French
In
in
Toronto,
Toronto.
yeah.
So what's your feeling? Do you think that that was like a waste of time for the government to do that?
I have mixed opinions about it, I guess.
Yeah.
In terms of signage and like road signs and packaging and stuff like that, it's all government regulated. So, I mean, it's law. Like the on packaging for any kind of goods, the French has to be equal in size and in dominance to English, and that's because of Quebec and our language laws. I think there's coming from a family, my parents were immigrants, so um, when I was growing up, our priority was learning English. So
Yeah.
it wasn't, there wasn't a big push for us to continue. We had to learn French in school, but there wasn't a big push for us to make sure that it was as good as our English. It was just make sure English, English, English. Now, if I was growing up now, or if I had kids growing up in Canada now, I would be, really, I would be really pushing the importance of learning French. French is a huge language around the world. So,
Yeah.
learning those two languages and even keeping my original mother tongue, that, I mean, all those would have been just beneficial for me and, as an adult in the working world. So,
I know actually, and a lot of people don't know this if you've never been to New Zealand. New Zealand has the same policy as Canada in the sense that everything is in English and Maori, and yet the number of people who actually speak Maori in New Zealand is like 1%, or even less than that,
Probably,
I would
yeah.
say. But the reason why the New Zealand government did that, as far as I know, some people might argue with me, is more of a political statement, which means that they wanted to recognise the Maori culture and tradition and also the Maoris were the first people there before the English. So it was part of a political movement to bring back the tradition and the culture of the Maori through the language and having it as part of the government policy to have it everywhere in terms of everything related to government. Would it be a political thing also in Canada?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not the historian by any means, but throughout Canada's history, there's been attempts by Quebec to separate, and a lot of it is for preservation of their culture and the language. So, it is. And I mean, Canada as a bilingual country is a good thing, I think. But I don't know if it's if it starts at the home or in the home, or if it starts at school, where the push should be to for French to become more important. But at the end of the day, at some point it's a personal thing too, right? Like if there's a student or a family who sees the benefit of it and pushes the student to continue, then why not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I have also been to Montreal,
Yes.
and I notice everyone speaks French.
So everyone speaks French, but most people can speak English,
As
but
well,
they'll also
yeah.
try to pretend like
Yeah.
they can't speak
Yeah,
English.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
they'll
Yeah.
push the French first, and then if it really becomes a struggle, then most of them can speak, or a lot of them can speak English.
Yeah. So it's interesting looking at the question again, should everyone be bilingual? There are obviously some countries like New Zealand and Canada who have made a political decision. Okay, we want to try to encourage our citizens to be bilingual for political reasons, for preservation of culture, for building good like Quebec and Ontario, good interstate relations and so on.
Yeah.
And of course, you and I, of course, are questioning how effective was that. At the end of the day, as you say, it comes down to the person's personal choice, really.
Yes,
And I think that I agree with you. I think everyone should be bilingual. But unfortunately, I think the reality is it all comes down to necessity, really.
Yes. And this is again, this is the thing right now. being a native English speaker is probably a benefit right now, but who's to say in 5 years, 10 years that Chinese or Arabic or Spanish don't become more important than or more widely spoken than English, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, for the time being, English might be the dominant language, but who knows, right? If
That's
so,
right.
forward thinkers would be like I tell my students now. I always tell them, okay, they have Arabic and they're learning English, which is great. Most of our students have Arabic. So if there are some students who also want to pick up some Mandarin or Chinese or some dialect of Chinese, so they'd be at a great advantage to have three of the most widely spoken languages. The world's kind of their
Yes.
oyster at that point, right?
Yes, exactly. So I think at the end of the day we can agree that it's a really good thing for
Sure.
everyone to
Yeah.
be bilingual,
Yeah.
and let's see what everybody else thinks.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you, Winston. But we have one last thing before you go. Actually, I have a question. We're starting to have questions from our students.
Oh, okay.
They ask a question, and I'm giving it to you completely cold.
Yes.
Okay. This is from a student who is in pre-intermediate. He's in our class,
Okay.
our school, sorry, and he's from Algeria,
Okay.
and he's also finding that I just have to just wait for 1 minute while I get this. Okay, now I know the question. Okay, here's the question. His name is Yusuf. He's from Algeria, and he's asking the question, when I first started learning English, I wanted to go home and revise my studies every day.
Okay.
But what I found was when I got home, I just didn't know where to start because there seems so much to learn. What should I do?
I guess it depends on the level and the lesson for the day. I think if it's a specific piece of grammar that was being taught and practiced that day, I would go and probably review the uses and the forms. How do I use it? When do I use it? That kind of information in that detail. Review that first. Kind of jog the memory as okay, why did we learn present perfect today? Okay, it's for these uses, and this is how we make it. In every class, there will be some form of written exercises, so probably review the exercises to kind of jog the memory. And then if there were any reading materials, they'd probably be in the book, or if there were any handouts, review that. And if he has a roommate or if he has some friends who are also studying, kind of practice or go over any of the questions or any of the speaking exercises that they were.
So how long would you recommend someone to revise, like daily? They've done the course, they go home.
I guess it depends on time. I mean, for language, I mean, if he's reviewing and revising, like just speaking all the time would be revision, right? So
Yeah.
if he practices just speaking English at all times, even with his roommates, or even if he's out in the malls or out on the street hanging out with his friends or whatever, speaking English at all the times, that would be reviewing and revising.
Yeah.
By default. But formally with his notes and stuff, an hour and a half. I mean, it depends on if he grasps the concept and he's comfortable using it, then maybe there's no need to revise. But if it's a new concept or a new or difficult one for him to understand, then maybe practicing some reading and maybe even watching some TV or listening to some music with the grammar.
Yeah,
concepts,
I think one of the things I can see happening is, okay, like you say, you learned a concept that day, you go home, and yes, you can practice your speaking and so on. But I think a lot of our students, they want to take out that textbook again. They want to have a look at what they did that day, and I agree with you, all those things. And maybe where some of them get a bit confused is, let's say they are studying present perfect and they didn't quite get it. So what they do is they go online and they look at a whole lot of questions and
Yes.
and then they get even more confused.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I have students, or maybe daily or every other day, they'll say, "Hey, teacher, I saw this on YouTube and I don't understand. It's not how you explained it to us." And then okay, so can you show me the website so I can see? And most of the times they won't remember, but the odd time they'll remember. They'll send me, or we'll look it up at the computer, and I'll watch it and I'll think, okay, some of it could be they misinterpreted what the video was saying, but there are videos with false information or incorrect information, which is unfortunately you can't stop a student from watching specific videos.
Yeah.
And no one's policing the content. So
Yeah.
I always tell them, like, maybe if you're looking up a new concept like present perfect or something, try 2 or 3 different sources.
Yes.
Because one maybe, it's just somebody decided to put up their own video and it's not 100% correct or it's not accurate, whatever. It's always good to kind of verify from another website, or even verify with me, or verify against the textbook that what you just saw is accurate, right?
Yeah,
because
I think that's actually a very good point, is to not just stick with that one thing and say, there you go, I don't understand, don't understand that either.
And sometimes it could just be a mistake that was, we catch mistakes in our textbooks even, and they're printed materials by experts and stuff. So it's possible that it's just a mistake or a typo or something like that, but it never hurts to kind of double check that information.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I think, students don't necessarily need to know this, but I'll say it anyway. We as teachers, when we prepare additional revision for students on let's say present perfect, we are very careful to select activities that will be able to reinforce what we taught them.
Yes.
Not just anything off the internet, bang, there you go. Because people, even online, they're teaching present perfect, but they might be coming from a whole other angle.
Yeah.
Which can make it very confusing.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Our textbook will teach a certain concept, like present perfect, under a specific context. For example, traveling, right? But another textbook or a teacher, like you said, a teacher might be doing it from the context of work experience or some other context, which different vocabulary and different maybe potentially different uses and stuff like that. So yeah, it might be that the concept or the explanation is correct, but the context is a little bit different, which could be confusing as well.
Yeah. So maybe the best thing is to really look at what was covered that day, like you say.
Yeah.
And if there were any things that they got wrong, I know they do write the correct answer in there when you review it in the class. But then to perhaps just ask themselves, do I understand why that is the correct answer?
Yes. Yeah.
And there's always the chance to come back the next day and say, teacher, yesterday, number 7, I didn't really get it. Can you go over that again? Yeah. And I think that's probably the best way for
I always
the student
encourage
to look at it.
the students to, when you're doing your homework or when you're looking over your notes, if something is confusing, then ask me again the next day.
Yeah.
If you don't get it, say that you don't get it, because I'm not going to know that you don't understand it.
That's right. Yeah.
I need to know that you don't understand so I can try and explain it in a different way, or get other students to help explain it, or get other students to say, hey, this is why, and it helps them practice. There's just so many benefits to asking the question if you don't understand.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, well, I hope that's helped your question, helped us. I hope this has helped answer your question, Yusuf. And we wish you all the best with your studies this month. And also thank you, Winston, again for your input.
Thank you. And
we thank you all for listening. And don't forget, if you have a question for us, please email me at info, that's INFO, at elitelc.com. And we will put your question into our next podcast. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.